Hello and welcome back to the Irish Mammy channel. Today we're going to be doing seed sowing. Feels like we've been doing lots of seed sowing over the last few weeks and months, but this is the last final push. Now, I'm not saying this is the last seeds I'm sowing this year, but it's the big push for all the bigger crops and the crops that I can't get sown after April or May is over. So I've been blinded by the sun and I can't believe it. 1 minute it's lashing rain, the next minute the sun's splitting the stones. So the plan today is to sow seeds. I'm going to go a little bit more in depth on just maybe two of the varieties. One being sweetcorn. I've had very mixed luck with sweetcorn over the years. Sometimes I've had great success and other times I've had absolute complete failures. So I have some theories as to why that is, but yet again this will be an experimental year. I hope to give you some of the tips that I have, but maybe I can't guarantee that they'll actually work until we have the season over. So maybe it will warrant a follow-up video later in the year to see if some of the things I'm doing this year are successful. So sweetcorn's one and squash is the other. I'm sown several varieties of squash this year. The ones I'm particularly excited about are a new one called honey nut squash. I've heard so much about this honey nut squash. It's like a butternut type squash, but it's really small, supposed to be really sweet. I had a lot of trouble getting seeds, so there was a couple of varieties of vegetables that I had an awful bit of trouble picking up seeds for. And again, these were ones that I have heard about from other YouTube channels. I watch a lot of American homesteading and gardening channels. So I think I spoke about King of the North peppers already. I had awful trouble finding those. And I have been on an American seed site, a well-known site, rareseeds.com, and I was so tempted to order seeds, though I wasn't fully sure if they were actually going to make it here or not. I had another roundabout way that I considered using as well, ordering from the same company, but I ended up not taking the risk because I tried that when Brexit came in. I tried ordering seeds from the UK and ended up being out of pocket. So even though it was only a small few varieties, I still wasn't fully prepared to take the chance. So one of the varieties was King of the North peppers, which I have already sown and they've come up great. Another was this honey nut squash that I've heard so many people talking about. It's supposed to be a lovely single serving squash that you can just roast in the oven and eat straight from the shell, basically. I mean, I'm sure it can be used in recipes as well, but it's supposed to be a very sweet, delicious, personal sized squash. So I would have been able to order those from the American site, though like I said, not sure if they'd actually arrive. But two of the places where I found seeds that I have been looking for was Irish Seed Savers, which was where I found the King of the North peppers, and a small company called, which I had already followed on Instagram, I will add, but never went on their website to see what they sold. And it's a small little company called Fat Tomato. And they seem to be a very small growing operation in Wexford, just in the south of the country. And they sell a load of their produce. They have a small honesty stall at their location in Wexford, and they also sell some of their plants, seeds. They also sell some of their seeds online and some of their preserved products, from what I can gather, and a lot of products that use items that they've grown in the garden, which actually it was very intriguing to me to see the scope of their operation. I was very impressed by it. To say that I have goals would probably be an understatement. But however, here we are with the honey nut squash Hope you can see that. And there's their website if you want to check it out. It's fattomato.ie. That's on the front of it. And I suppose give them a follow on Instagram as well when you're at it. So as well as the honey nut squash, I am also sowing spaghetti squash. So this is a winter squash as well, called spaghetti squash. Again, it's one that you can tear the flesh and it somewhat resembles spaghetti. I suppose a good replacement for high carb pasta. That's what I hope to use it as, but we'll see if we actually get some squash out of it. Now I have these seeds ordered fairly new. I think I ordered them this year. I'm pretty sure I ordered them this year, but I do have older seeds that I want to try first. So you might be familiar with my foil packets of seeds here, and maybe you know the story already. So these came from the UK pre-Brexit, when we could no longer get any more seeds, from a company called Premier Seeds Direct, which I absolutely loved. They had great value seeds, great quantities of seeds, and for somebody who's a seedaholic like me, that was great. But I still have a lot of their seeds left now, and they're all getting old. I think the last order was in 2020 or maybe 21. So some of these seeds are from 2019, 2020 and maybe 21. These are packed in 2019 and have a sow by date of 2021. So I'm not holding out much hope, but I still have time to sow more if these don't germinate. So that's why I'm trying these now, just to see if I get germination first of all, and then if they don't, I have time to resow. And if they don't, I will be resowing my fresh seed. And the other squash, well, I mean, these are just the highlight squash. I'm sowing a lot of squash. So this is buttercup squash, a lovely yellow fleshed squash inside, super sweet as well. And I just like the density of the flesh as well. It's really, really dense flesh. When you mash it, you can use it really in place of potatoes. And my wee man was weaned basically on this squash here, between this and butternut squash. So he is a fan of squash as well, so that's why it's important to me to grow lots of squash. Now I am growing other ones, a lot of them. Well, this is a newer one. So this is one of those curry type squash, blue curry. So it's just a blue kabocha type squash. There's orange variety is called uchiki curry, I think, which I also have seeds for. And then there's a green one. I'm not sure what the name of it is, maybe just a green curry, I'm not sure. But they're basically they're a small squash, about 1 kilo in weight. Perfect size actually for feeding the family if I get the fruit to develop. So last year, you can tell I'm a little bit traumatized by squash plants. So this year I will be doing a few different things, making sure I fertilize for start. So obviously potassium or potash is very important for any flowering plants or fruiting plants, which this is a fruiting plant. So I will be making sure that we get tomato feed. So I do a liquid tomato feed, obviously for my tomatoes, also for the peppers. I'll be doing it for the strawberries up there this year as well. So now I will be also making sure that the squash plants up there get the tomato fertilizer. I'll also put pelleted fertilizer in the soil before, which will be a slow release nitrogen feed. So that should get them off to a good start foliage wise. And hopefully that will be enough to make the difference. As you can imagine, last year, well, with the spraying of the BT and Nemesis being top priority for me last year, I would imagine, you can imagine that the other spraying, like the liquid fertilizer, kind of went to pot. That, and of course with Junior as well to be looked after, and limited time in the polytunnel, yeah, that was one of the things that fell by the wayside, definitely, was the fertilising, which I might add did not affect my tomatoes one bit. And when I go to plant my tomatoes, I'm going to impart one of what I think is one of the best secrets for growing good tomatoes. So keep an eye out for my tomato planting video. Okay, so today we're sowing sweet corn and winter squash. I also have some herbs to sow that I forgot about. Marjoram and what is the other one? Marjoram and, oh yeah, celery leaf. I also want to mention these seed packets. You've probably seen a lot of them. I have a lot of these from this particular company. These are from seedaholic.com, an Irish based company, and they have an absolute wealth of information, and I do think I've mentioned them before on videos. A wealth of information on each of the plants, so including giving a history on the plant, a history of the naming of the plant, the reason why it's named what it is, and all sorts of different connections that it makes. It gives sowing instructions, cultivating instructions, harvesting instructions, culinary use information, storage information, and this one even has seed saving information. So it's an absolute, like, it's the whole back of the page as well. So this is an A5 page, and like I said, just absolutely tons of information. I personally think they're great for beginners, especially because like, you learn everything you need to know on that A5 page about that plant, and of course it's tailored specifically to an Irish growing climate, which would probably be similar to a UK growing climate as well. They also sell to the continent. I don't think they sell to the UK at the minute, again, Brexit. So yeah, so I just wanted to mention them because I actually find them very helpful. So along with that today, I am also sowing, I'm sowing a load of squash. I'm just going to quickly go through the varieties. So Blue Hubbard. Again, these are all old seeds. They might not come to anything, but we're going to try it. So this is Blue Hubbard, a huge big blue skinned squash with yellow flesh. I think it's shaped like an onion bulb, something similar to that, if I remember right. And I have grown them before. I'm nearly sure I've harvested Blue Hubbard before. Marina di Chioggia. Definitely butchered the pronunciation of that. I believe this is the tanny orange variety. A big pumpkin with some kind of warts on it, I'm nearly sure. Rouge Vif de Tombe. I think that's another huge big squash. Orange one as well. Oh, this is the Uchiki curry that I mentioned earlier. The orange kind of kabocha type squash. Yes. Jumbo pink banana. So this is like a really elongated, stripy looking, no, it's not stripy looking, elongated and almost pink hued. It's tan with a pink hue on the outside of it, and the flesh is really deep orange with a pinkish tinge to it as well, and really, really sweet. So look, these are all fairly hard to grow outdoors here in Ireland, I'll be honest, and I don't think I'll have room for all of them in the polytunnel. I've had one great successful year with squash. I actually grew them in a bed here at the side of the house. We had just built the bed, and it was filled with lovely rich compost and mushroom compost and soil, and rather than waste it, and I wasn't ready to plant it out yet with the trees and stuff that I did eventually put into it. So to make use of it, rather than wasting it over a season, I grew pumpkins and squash in it, and I had a fantastic harvest. I'll throw a picture up here for you to see. And if you follow me on Instagram, you may have seen it already. That was a few years ago now, so I'm ready for a good harvest again. But again, fertilising I think will be key. But we have to get them germinated first, so we'll not put the cart before the horse. Okay, so let's talk about planting sweet corn. I realise I get very all over the place with these videos. I lose my train of thought a lot and blabber. So this is the variety I'm growing. Tasty Sweet F1 sweet corn. Now in the past I've had great success with sweet corn by soaking seeds. The theory is that sweet corn is high in sugars, high in starches, so apparently it's hard for it to germinate for that reason. Soaking it in sweet corn, or soaking it in water, softens the outside of it, obviously, and leaves it easier for the actual radicle to escape from the seed. So I've had almost 100% germination rate with doing that. But I've also had maybe 30 to 40% germination doing it in other years. So it hasn't been consistent for me. The other possibility is that when the soaking of seeds did not work for me, I may have been using older seed. So I'm now working with the theory that the seed needs to be fresh. So I ordered my seed freshly this year. Now I bought fresh seed last year and still had poor germination, but it was from a garden centre that may not be as busy as some, and I can't be sure that they were fully fresh seed. So I definitely ordered fresh seed this year from Seedaholic, and in fact I'm convinced they're completely fresh, as in grown last year and harvested at the end of the season last year, which is the freshest you'll get for the likes of sweet corn or any legume seeds. And the reason I'm convinced of it is because they were out of stock for ages, and I waited and waited and waited for the stock to come back in. So that has me convinced that it's the absolute freshest seed possible. Now, having said that, I have no doubt that Seedaholic seed are always fresh. So I'm going to try. I need a minimum of 30 plants. These packets have 45 seeds. I have 3 packs. I have seed trays here, 2 of them, and these are huge big cells. So sweet corn plants are hungry plants. They are big feeders, and they're big plants very quickly, as in when they germinate they turn into a big plant very fast. So within 4 weeks it'll be huge. So it is a type of grass technically. I'm using these really big trays. So you might be familiar with deeper trays for legumes, so for peas and French beans and any sort of bean, runner beans. They're recommended for most legumes because they have such a vast root system that a deeper tray is used. So this is a deeper tray, and I have 2 of these trays. So what I'm proposing to do is a comparison. I'm going to sow half of my seeds, having pre-soaked them, which I'm going to do that now, and at the very end I'll show you those soaked seeds going into the tray, and I'm going to sow the other half in a second tray without soaking, and we'll see what the difference is, if any. Maybe there's no difference. Like I said, I need a minimum of 30 plants. I could fit 60 plants in. These trays have 35 cells in each tray, so I have potential for 70 plants. So another thing to note with sweet corn is that it needs to be planted in a grid rather than a line. It doesn't matter what size the grid is, but you can't plant it in a line because it won't pollinate properly. So sweet corn plants, firstly they're a grass plant, they grow huge. They have 1 to 2 cobs per plant, usually lower down on the stalk, and they come out on opposite directions of the stalk. At the top of the plant is a flower, so that's the male part of the plant. The cobs are the female part, and the flower gives off pollen, which needs to drop down on the tassels of the cobs below, the female parts. So that is helped by wind, definitely. They're wind pollinated, but to ensure even pollination, it's important that each plant is surrounded by another plant, so that helps to ensure that they're pollinated better. So they don't obviously have to be pollinated from the single flower that's above them. They can be pollinated from the ones all around them as well. So planting them in a grid form just gives you better assurance that they're going to be pollinated properly. And the tassels on the end of the corn cob, basically it's a ton of strings coming out of the cob of corn, and each of those strings is a tiny little hole on the inside of it that allows the pollen from the male flower in. And each of those strings corresponds to a kernel of corn on the cob. So you may have noticed, if you've grown corn before, or if you've seen other people growing corn, that sometimes you can get a cob of corn with blank spaces where the kernels didn't develop. And the reason for that is that the tassel, the string of the tassel on the end of the corn cob, didn't actually get pollinated. And that has happened to me numerous times. It's okay for an odd one or two to be missing. That doesn't make much difference to your corn. But if over half your corn cob hasn't been pollinated, then that's a problem. So that's why we plant in a grid form. So a grid form could be simply 3 across by as many long as you want, or 3 by 3. I would say 3 plants by 3 plants would be the minimum, so 9. And then any format after that, it could be 3 by 40, or it could be 40 by 40, or it could be a field of corn, obviously, as well, which does happen, of course. But for those of us gardeners, home gardeners, who are probably more limited with space, the minimum I would say is 3 by 3. And if you can plant more, all the better. They generally need about 12 inches apart. Now you can have a little bit of wiggle room on that, but of course the flower on the top of the plant needs plenty of space as well. And it's a grass plant, like think of maybe pampas grass or some of those more ornamental grasses. It's on that stature. It's huge, absolutely huge. But we're only going one stalk, individual to harvest corn. So because it's such a huge plant, it obviously needs lots of food. So you might get away with maybe 10 inches between them, if you were going to be diligent about fertilizing. But again, the wind needs to get at them. The wind needs to loosen the pollen and let it fall down onto the plants below. I have grown sweet corn outdoors here in Ireland and had overwhelming success. I had far too much corn. So if you remember out in the field there, I have some raised beds. I think they're 8 by 4. So one year I did grow that. Now I think that was 2020, and I think it was really, really hot summer. So I would imagine the heat of the summer and the dryness of the summer helped. But obviously they have to be kept well watered as well. But they love the heat. And that is why I grow them. Actually, I've grown them in the allotment beds as well. And I would imagine that was a 3 by 4 or 3 by 5 grid, and had great success at that too. But again, probably it was a good hot summer. I have also planted them outdoors and had terrible luck with getting, and not now, we're not talking about germination now, we're talking about actual yield of the plant. So you're very much dependent on the weather. If you have a cooler, wetter summer, which basically, like, that's more common in Ireland than a hot, dry summer. Though we're getting more hot, dry summers than we used to. But if you have a cool, wet summer, you're just not going to get great germination either, because obviously the plants are wet, the pollen can't get falling freely, or it'll get washed off, or all sorts of different reasons. So to guarantee a good crop, to guarantee a good yield, I'm growing in the polytunnel. Now, like I said, I've not had 100% success with that either, but I really think that's going to be a big help. Anyway, we'll get to the seed sowing. So I have 3 packets of seed here, 45 seeds in each, so 135, my maths is right, 135 seeds ish. So I'm going to put half of them into this jar of water, and I'm going to put the jar of water into the propagator here behind me. So one of the years I had absolute brilliant success with germination. I had actually put them in the propagator with the plan of just leaving them there for an hour or two to soften up or whatever, and proceeded to forget about them until the next day, pretty much 24 hours later, and came out and thought, oh shoot, I forgot them. They're probably in mush, and they were super soft, definitely. I mean, I could squish them and the flesh was going to come out of them. But I had great germination, so that was a big surprise. So I'm not going to leave them soaking for 24 hours, but I'm going to leave them for a few hours. We're actually at 4:30 now, so later on this evening. I'm probably leaving them 3 or 4 hours in the propagator. Now this is still heated at 18 degrees, and it's probably higher than 18 degrees at the minute just because the sun is out intermittently. But we're going to get on with this and actually get some work done. So there's one full packet. I'm going to take that's 45 seeds, and I'm going to take half of another pack. I'll count roughly 22 or 3 seeds. And then obviously I'm going to have more than 35 seeds, so what I'll do is I'll double up and put 2 seeds in a cell and see what germinates, and they can be split if they do all germinate and grow properly. So 1, 2, 18, 19, 20. So I'm going to fill both my trays and have my tray ready for later on when I'm sowing that second batch, and then I'm going to go on and just direct sow these into the tray. So normally I use seed compost for all my seeds. There are a couple of exceptions, one being sweet corn. So like I said, it's a very hungry feeder. So what I'm going to do with my sweet corn is half fill these cells with potting compost, or maybe 3/4 fill them with potting compost, and then at the last quarter is going to be seed compost. Now my reasoning for that is they need the fine fluffy soil for germinating, for ease of germinating, so that the radicle can move easier or grow easier when the seed sprouts first. But after that it then needs feeding fairly quickly, and seed compost has very, very little nutrition in it, simply because when you're sowing seeds, the seed itself has plenty of food in it. That's the nature of a seed. It is the food for the plant for it to germinate. But because this is such a hungry feeder plant, you would either, if you had it just grown in seed compost, you'd need to be fertilizing it pretty much straight away after you see the grass shoots. So to avoid that, I am going to use the potting compost, which has much more nutrition in it, and that leaves it that I don't need to feed it. Probably it'll give me 2 to 3 weeks, by which time the plant will possibly be big enough for planting in the ground anyway. And if it's not, I will just use liquid feed then if I have to. So the first compost to go in is the potting compost. And the plan is to fill it to the top and then tamp it down, and then whatever space is left will be topped up with the seed compost. So obviously this is going to be fairly loose. first. I'm breaking up big lumps, but I'm not overly worried about the smaller lumps. Potting compost is generally more lumpy than seed compost. And I want them to be fairly evenly full, but doesn't have to be exact. And this is the same method for all trays when you're filling them, except when you're doing the second fill you'll be using seed compost. So I'm going to tamp each one down, and you can see I have about an inch of depth on the top of that one, to the top crease of my finger, and I'm expecting it similar on all of the rest of them. Again, you don't want to tamp it down too hard. You want to just make sure there's no air pockets, but you also want to make sure that it's not too tight that the root can't get through. So it's a fine line. Okay, now we're ready for the seed compost, and I hope you'll be able to see the difference very clearly when I put the seed compost on top. So you can see it's nice and black. It's actually, if you feel it, there's a lot more sandy texture to it, so it's also more free draining than potting compost would be. And I'm just going to spread it out over the top, and again it's going to be tamped down as well, just a little bit. And we do want to remove any lumps from this layer because we don't want to impede the radicle of the seed, or the root of the seed. Now, slight tap just to make sure we're full and no air pockets. Okay, there we are. Tray is ready for sowing. And we're going to make a double divot in each of these cells, because I'm more than likely going to have 2 seeds in each cell, so I'm going to go 2 little tiny holes in each cell. Okay, and we've still 2 seeds over, so we'll stick 3 seeds in 2 of these cells. Now I'm going to cover them over again with more seed compost, just to top them up. And next we have to make sure we label them properly, especially as we're doing a comparison on these plants. Oh, and we may as well put the date on as well. So these trays are going to stay in the greenhouse. If I had room, I would have probably put them in the propagator. But we're supposed to be getting a nice week of weather, so I'm hoping that the greenhouse will be hot enough. I'm also going to reset my thermometer here. You can't see that thermometer, but I have one of these min-max thermometers that records the minimum temperature and the maximum temperature reached over a period. So I'm going to reset it. Keep an eye on the low temperatures over the next few days. If I feel it's getting down too low, I may move them to what I call the halfway greenhouse, which is up beside the polytunnel. When I take my tomatoes and peppers out of the propagator here, I do move them to that greenhouse because this greenhouse is too cold for something coming straight from the propagator. The other greenhouse is kind of a halfway temperature between the propagator and the polytunnel, so it gives them a chance to acclimate. So it's slightly warmer than this greenhouse. If I need to move them up there, I will, but like I said, I'll prefer to have them here so I can keep an eye on them. So I'm going to reset this thermometer and keep an eye over the next few mornings as to what temperature it went down to overnight. So we're on to squash now next. So the first thing you notice is that I have pots full of compost. These are another huge plant, and you'll even see the seeds are even big. So for that reason, because they're big robust seeds, they're not as delicate. The root's not as delicate when it comes out of this seed, when it sprouts. So it has a little bit more oomph behind it, so it doesn't need this fluffy soil or compost that our other seeds need. So I'll just show you the size of the seeds here if you can gauge from that. So that's quite a big seed, and in terms of seed they're quite big. And these are the buttercup squash. So 2 seeds per pot. If both germinate, I may separate them out, but they would want to be separated when they're young so that they're not so that they're not starving each other of nutrition. And these seeds, you might, I don't know if you can see close up, but they're quite flat. They're like a flat disc, quite thin. So it's generally recommended to sow them on their side, especially if you're a heavy waterer, because they can rot. You can imagine if they're lying flat in compost. The dog's just pulling out big sticks. If they're lying flat in a pot, the water could potentially sit, especially actually if it was facing that direction. There's a chance for water to lie on it there like that. So that would make the seed rot. The other reason is that the root and stalk, the 2 pieces that come out from the seed, will actually come out from the sides. They're not going to come out from the middle there. So they're going to come out from the edges. So that's another reason to put it on its side. So that's the recommendation, is to sow them on their side. I better do labels because I will definitely confuse myself before I start sowing. There we are, all the labels in. I'm actually sowing today as well, included in this, because they are the same family. Courgettes. So I'm going to do green courgettes or zucchini, called Black Beauty. and a yellow squash or zucchini or courgette, 3 different names, called Athena polka, and they're both a bush variety of courgette, which I find much easier to grow and harvest, easier to control as well. I'm just doing 1 pot of each of those. I have not planned where some of these are going to end up, but there's always a space in the bed somewhere to tuck these plants in. Now definitely the courgette plants or zucchini plants are fairly big plant, and I will be doing another sowing of these probably mid-June, maybe early to mid-June, and hopefully I'll have more space for a few extra of those at that stage. I'm a big fan of courgettes in the garden. They grow like weeds, especially if they're grown indoors in the polytunnel or greenhouse here. And if you want to control them so that they're not producing so much, you can still grow them outdoors. So courgettes are known to be the plant that your neighbours get sick of when they start to produce, because gardeners end up being very generous when they've run out of ideas to use up courgettes. But when I run out of ideas, I like to shred it up and freeze it and use it to make courgette bread. So it's a quick bread, or like a soda bread, with courgettes and grated cheese and some herbs, and I like to make that throughout the winter. And of course I make it with fresh courgette as well. But the advantage of freezing your courgette is it's actually it's a very watery vegetable. So when you freeze the plant and then thaw it and wring it out, you'll actually get much more water out of it, which can help you to control the water in the recipe that you're making. I like to use it in along with strong flavours, so curries especially, or sometimes blended into soups to help bulk up the thickness of the soup. So if I want a nice thick soup, I'll add some courgette in and just blend them in, and nobody'd even know they're in it. And I could talk for hours about courgette recipes. I've really come up with a lot of recipes to use courgettes over the years. Courgette gratin, yeah, loads of them, but we'll not go into that now because the video will end up hours long. Now all that's left to do is to cover them with a little bit more compost, water them lightly, and then find room in the propagator. That could be the biggest problem. Okay, we have managed to make space in the propagator. I managed to make another short little video in between, just detailing and going through what was in my propagator. That video will probably come up after this one, so you can keep an eye out for that. I found space for them. I have the sweet corn over here behind me. I really need to get more shells in this greenhouse. I'm going to continue with the rest, but I'm not bringing you along for that because there's only so much seed sowing one can watch. Besides, my wee man is awake from his nap now, so he needs lifting, and I'm just going to keep going with my seed sowing over the rest of the evening. Lovely evening for it. It has turned out to be gorgeous after lots of rain all day. Intermittent showers, I think is how you would describe it. So I would like to thank you for watching if you've made it this far. Don't forget to hit the like button down below. Subscribe if you haven't already. If you watch my videos regularly, you're sick of hearing me saying that, but it just gives me that extra bit of a push if I see the people are liking and enjoying my videos and interested in what I am putting up. So I would really appreciate the support. And again, thank you very much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Bye bye. Go over there.